Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Mader. I'm the multimedia editor and early ed reporter for the Hechinger Report. Today, I'm here with a talented panel of early childhood educators and experts, and we are going to talk about remote pre-K. As the pandemic has continued, parents and teachers have had to confront the reality of remote learning for even our youngest students. And although decades of research tell us that in-person learning is, of course, the most ideal for young children, online learning has emerged as, for many children, the only option for continued learning, as many schools and childcare centers have closed due to COVID-19. So today we're going to talk about how districts and states are trying to offer developmentally appropriate remote pre-K. We're going to delve into what that looks like and whether it's even possible. So first, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Brian Mack. She's the Vice President of Education at Teaching Strategies. We have Martha Strickland, State Director 4K, South Carolina First Steps. And we have Anita Toddy, Director of Early Childhood Education, Detroit Public Schools Community District. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. So first, Anita and Martha, I would love to start with you. Can you both quickly give us a landscape of pre-K learning in Detroit and South Carolina? How is your state or city navigating learning for pre-K students? Martha, maybe we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jackie. I'm so glad to join you. In South Carolina, back in mid-March when this all happened, our governor closed public schools. We provide publicly funded 4-year-old kindergarten in a mixed delivery system in South Carolina, and South Carolina First Steps 4K oversees that private side. So our centers were we were just like everybody else, reeling and trying to figure out how we were going to manage this. We did go to a distance learning situation that we called for our classrooms until the end of May, 1st of June, when we were able to open back up again in childcare centers and in private schools across South Carolina. Then back in August, we opened back up face-to-face. So we have been doing those whole days, full day learning face-to-face since August, really. But we did have that experience of the distance learning in March, April, May, and a little bit in June. So it was quite a challenge, but we were helpful to have so many professional organizations and tools to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Anita, I would love to hear a little bit about the landscape for you in Detroit.
Thank you for asking me to join this discussion. Detroit Public Schools is Michigan's largest school district. It serves about 50,000 students pre-K to 12. And within that, our Office of Early Childhood seeks to provide high quality education and free education to 4-year-olds. So once the pandemic hit, we had to kind of scramble, as everyone else did, to try to figure out how we were going to provide educational services to our preschool children. So we did what we called a distance learning package, and we created 50 lessons with 50 videos. And this was to approach those parents who did not have any internet or any laptops. So the hard copy was for them. It also had a link in the book so that our parents who had access to telephones and cell phones could use the link that way. And also for those parents who did have laptops as well as internet access, they could access the Ready Rosie and the Teaching Strategies family portal as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So speaking of teaching strategies, I would love to hear from you, Brian. Can you give us a brief explainer of teaching strategies? I know you've partnered with districts and programs, especially during this time. And I would love to hear your observations about how providers are developing or delivering developmentally appropriate pre-K in the midst of COVID.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you. It's so great to be on the line with Martha and Anita. And as Jackie mentioned, I have the unbelievable honor of getting to work with folks across the country that have been navigating through this. And, at Teaching Strategies, we provide comprehensive solutions for assessment, curriculum, family engagement for the early childhood space. And we felt like we didn't know much of anything when this all first started. Having done this for 4 decades, we were in the same boat of how do we show up and how do we help this field. And you asked, Jackie, of how folks are addressing this. I think one of the most powerful things that's come out of all of this is this reconfirmation of developmentally appropriate practice and what we know about children's development, what we know about the importance of family partnerships. And we got to get back to basics and remember the whys behind things. Child development hasn't changed. What children need from us, what families need from us, it's just the vehicles and how we get there that's different. So it's been amazing to see how such a nimble and dynamic and flexible field has spun on a dime to figure out ways to still deliver high quality experiences for children when there's a lot of other factors outside of their control.
Great, thank you so much. So Anita, I would love to hear from you because you are still providing remote pre-K. What is the ideal model for remote pre-K in terms of, time in front of a screen, time off screen, activities, parental involvement? What does developmentally appropriate, remote pre-K look like?
So we needed to create developmentally appropriate materials for students and for families that had to be easy enough for parents to follow and not create a burden on them during the shutdown. So once the shutdown became permanent, it was clear that we had to be able to continue the preschool program effectively at a distance for the rest of the school year and beyond. We needed to have developmentally appropriate materials for the students and families. We needed to have access to the curriculum, access to the materials anywhere, anytime for the teachers and administrators. We needed to provide professional development options for the teachers to do at home during the lockdown. And we had to figure out new ways to engage and communicate with our families. For DPSCD, we offer a full day schedule for our families with the same daily routines they would receive face-to-face. The teachers free to divide the classroom into 3 small groups. The first group meets with the teachers doing morning circle, while the other 2 groups are engaged in choice time. And they do that with using our Teaching Strategies family portal and Ready Rosie. Small group instruction consists of literacy and our math lessons. Our teachers they offer office hours for families that may need that more one-on-one instruction or assistance. And although there is 1 hour provided for these meetings, we only expect that our youngest learners participate as long as they are developmentally able. Our teachers are live online with our students for the morning circle, small group, and office hours. Recorded activities and sessions are provided by our Teaching Strategies and Ready Rosie app. Our parents use these resources to assist during choice time. The ideas and activities are parent friendly and our parents are having a ball. We have 61% of our families using Ready Rosie. They like it. It is translated for them in Spanish for our families who need that. And it keeps the parents involved in their children's education.
Great, thank you so much for that. Before we go more, I really would love to hear, Brian and Martha, your thoughts. So, we've heard a lot about online pre-K before the pandemic, and it's pretty controversial. And now we're talking about remote pre-K. Are those the same or are they different?
We certainly do feel like in this time that we've had to make distance learning, and so we're going to use that terminology on a remote learning, distance learning. It's just a different way of doing it, but we have to figure out, as Anita said, how to make it developmentally appropriate so that our children learn through that active learning, that we know that that's how children grow and develop. Also, to engage the parents. It's been really fun to watch, in this terrible pandemic time. Parents have risen to the call. They are engaged with their children, I feel, more than they ever have been, and know more about their children probably than they ever have. When you have tools in a curriculum, such as a parent portal with creative curriculum, and you're able, and Ready Rosie, the tools from Ready Rosie that we also utilize, you are really able to see what parents are engaging with their children every day. And it's not screen time. It is actual parents being engaged in real learning activities with children. And then that assessment cycle can continue on when the teacher is able to view either videos or products that a child has made that can be shared that the parent and the child did together. So you can continue to do that ratings on a child's developmental scale throughout in a very developmentally appropriate way. So we've just all learned new ways to do things, but sticking to those tried and true values that we know.
Great. Brian, thoughts on that? Is online pre-K and remote pre-K, is that the same? Is it different?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we've talked so much with partners across the country, and Anita spoke to it a moment ago too, is this idea of flexibility, right? So we've all used the term developmentally appropriate practice, like we've already said it 12 times on this call, but like, what does that really mean? It means that it's age appropriate. Yes, it's price of entry, but then it means it's individualized to that child. Like, what do they need in this moment? And then the third component that I like to think about is that it's culturally responsive and all the things that that means, right? So you don't get that from a child just having screen time with an experience, right? You get that when you still are building a sense of community. And you use technology through distance learning to, as Anita laid out, there is this large group in the morning, but we knew during COVID that large group was not going to be 20 children. So Detroit took the approach of, giving the teacher the flexibility to break those up into some smaller groups so we still can engage in that discussion and children can be building those relationships. Others, broke it up to have other teachers supporting it. And there was this idea of empowering teachers to make the decisions that made the most sense for the children and families that they support and serve in a way that wasn't overwhelming. So when I think about the difference of like a more structured kind of online learning experience that we see in some of the upper grades, how that it doesn't translate the same way in a preschool environment where teachers consistently need to be responsive to what they're seeing in experience with children, whether they're in the classroom or not.
Great, thank you so much. So I know a lot of other states and districts are in a similar position as you, Martha and Anita, are. And I'd love to talk about some challenges. I'm sure other educators can relate. What are some challenges that you both have had in reaching children and offering remote pre-K during this time?
So obviously, as we discussed, accessibility, the Wi-Fi, internet, having that accessibility for families in South Carolina with many rural communities has been a real struggle. And that was another reason why we decided face-to-face delivery would be better for our students and families when we could get back to that shape. Our child care centers are experts in keeping children safe and healthy, and we layer the education piece on top of that. But we certainly have adhered to and listened to all the practices promoted by the CDC and DHEC. So we've had other challenges with the face-to-face delivery, as well as that virtual world, having those online, having that, not that connectivity also. So been some other challenges, but we have proudly think that our families and children have been so resilient to move on through this. So we've learned an awful lot through the challenges.
Great, thank you. Anita, I would really love to hear the challenges you've encountered as you are still doing remote pre-K now. What are some of those challenges?
Well, some of our challenges include just keeping the families online consistently. And providing those laptops. The district provided laptops to 50,000 families, but preschool received loaner laptops. And then once we get the loaner laptops to the families, it's also a challenge in repairs, or if the computer goes down, how do you get it? How do parents get back online? We had to provide a lot of training because that was another thing. How do I even cut the computer on? How do I even get to teaching strategies? How do I get to on Teams with the teacher? So we had to provide a lot of training, and not only just for our parents, but for our staff and central office ourselves, because this is something that we've never done before. So providing that education and training, and also making sure that when our children and families did get the laptops, that we were able to be consistent with getting them on and consistent with repairs.
Great, thank you so much. So my final question, research tells us that in-person early learning is beneficial because, of course, kids learn a lot by developing relationships, by interacting with their teachers and peers. And obviously that's very different under remote learning world. So I would love to hear a bit about, for educators who are remote, how can they encourage and support social emotional learning? How can they develop relationships with students that they've never met, especially, really young children who may not sit in front of the computer for very long? And also, what role should families play? Anita, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I tell you, when I visit the preschool classrooms, those students are so excited to see their teachers. They're so excited to see their peers. They know each other's names. They even text and FaceTime with each other outside of the team's family. And again, we offer office hours that allows our families to do one-on-one with the teacher. We also have social workers that are just for our preschool families. And we have a social worker connected to each school. So they're able to also connect with social workers. We have an awesome team of social workers, and they provide that assistance just to our pre-K families. In addition, some of our teachers did home visits. They did the home visits face to face. They actually went to the homes, even though they may have stayed on the porch or out in their car. They did the home visits, and that made that connection for them with their children. They delivered home backpacks to our families as well. So our teachers just have gone over and beyond to make sure that they have that connection and they are creating those relationships with those families.
Thank you so much. Brian, I don't know if you have any more thoughts about that too, as I'm sure you've seen a lot of examples of this in the districts you're working with.
Yeah, if we have a couple more minutes, I can share just a couple things that I was super impressed that I've seen across the country that I honestly I hadn't initially thought of really building in this time for children to just informally engage with each other and with their teachers, right? So we've seen some programs that have, encouraging during lunch or snack, or just literally planning for times that are not instruction, but are just to come together for children to talk. And yes, we have to learn the new social norms of Zoom. And, we don't want to be muting children because they're being noisy, because we wouldn't put our hand over their mouth if they were in the classroom. Like, we have to teach now what that looks like and how that can be distracting. And that's hard sometimes because it might be easy to just hit that Zoom, that mute button. But what message is that sending when we think of the positive guidance and those positive messages? So that's how we can learn, not in a large group read aloud, but in these informal snack chats or lunch chats, to point that out to children and start small and grow bigger. But then one program I was talking to recently is doing that for families, because they often saw each other at pickup and drop off casually and had moments without their children to talk and maybe vent or ask a question. So some programs are setting up Zoom calls for families without children. So your child's over here, but then, hey, mom, dad, abuela, whoever, here's the space you can still come together. So I think, you asked a little earlier about technology and FaceTime being a little controversial, and, folks have different levels of comfort there. I think we have to think about, how do we make technology work for us? And in the things that are most important to us in early childhood in particular are the relationships. So how does technology not isolate anyone, but how do we make it work for us to strengthen those relationships that much more? And I think that's something we can carry on post COVID, and think about this new platform for us to jump off of, to have more access to more children and more families, and bring them together.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much, Brian, Martha, and Anita, for your time today. I found this really fascinating and helpful, and I'm sure that other people who are watching may have questions. So if any of you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, Jackie Mader, either on Twitter, which is at Jackie Mader, or you can email me at mader@heckingerreport.org, and I would be happy to connect you with any of the panelists here. Thank you again so much for watching, and thank you to our panelists for your time.